These monthly lectures of 8 p.m. radiated for the whole planet by the request of the hierarchy are realized on the second Monday of each month. We are realizing this encounter today due to the apparition that we had yesterday. But in October, this monthly encounter will return to its regular time on the 30th, which would be the last Monday of October at 8 p.m., unless there is some change. Another invitation that we would like to make is regarding our work tomorrow at 5 p.m. As you know, tomorrow, the last Wednesday of each month, we have a vigil of silence here in Figueira, and the purpose is that we can be in silence all day, and at 5 p.m. we will have a lecture with Jose. So tomorrow we will close the cycle of the parables, which was also a request from the hierarchy. The first parable that we saw was in July. The second was in August, the prodigious son. And tomorrow we will close the cycle with the workers of the vineyard, which is a theme very much connected with things that are interesting to us in these days. Therefore, you are all invited for tomorrow to close this cycle. All those lectures of the parables will be edited, and they will be available for those who are interested. Our subject today is the healing of fear in the human being. The healing of fear in the human being. Then let us go on. The humanity on the surface of the planet. For this humanity, fear is the first illness. We know that this humanity is considered by the hierarchy as an ill humanity due to its past, to its activities on earth from the beginning. Therefore, today it is a humanity needing much healing. And today, its principal need is to heal that fear. If we could manage to get rid of that fear, other illnesses would disappear practically totally, remaining only those that have to do with the contamination of the dealing with the contamination of the air, etc. The science of yoga affirms through the mother from Ciarubindo, which was an illuminated being, and this is revealed by her, that fear is the principal illness of humanity. So let us work with that to see if we can manage something, first with ourselves, and then with our surroundings, and so on, collaborating with the planetary transition. And humanity must go through also. Fear is impregnated in humanity from the beginning of its existence. Therefore, we are before a task which is eternal, unless we look to the future and find some new possibilities, which is what we are trying to find. And this is what we will work with today. The yoga says that the first thing that we need to be healed of forever is fear. This is the absolute priority for humanity. And the yoga also says that fear is more dangerous than the worst illness that could exist. We don't have a clear perception of that, and we don't perceive, we cannot even perceive what we fear, because we're not very attentive to ourselves. We're not very vigilant with ourselves. But it is fear that can be more or less conscious, which causes all problems. If fear did not exist, we would be other beings. Without fear, many things could not happen. And it's good that we know this, because if we begin to work with fear, if we begin to perceive to what point we are able to control it or to liberate ourselves from it, many things will not happen with us. Because there are things that are in our destiny, optional destinies, which is optional karma, and fear, which attracts. When there is fear, it begins to attract karmic situations, basically negative karmic experiences. They begin to surface in us. Before we torment ourselves and we worry ourselves, let us try to get rid of our fear as much as possible, as much as we can manage. And let us see that our life will be better, our situations will be much better. But there we need to be very brave, we need to have courage and truly get rid of fear. And it will leave, because it's not fixed in us. Then we would see how better things would be. Even in illnesses that are already instilled in us, because they could have been placed there by fear. The fear of being ill attracts it. Fear is like a magnet, and it's very dangerous because it gives importance to things that have no importance whatsoever. We fear things that do not have the least importance. Things of life, if they're received well and disinvolved correctly, they can disappear. But with fear and through fear, nothing can truly be changed. Our health begins to decline, and everything in us becomes worse. It is foreseen that the human being should last more than 100 years, but with fear and having that fear instilled within us, we survive much less than that. We do not live as long as we could. And fear sometimes gives importance to things that are important because fear believes that it is so. For example, the fear of certain symptoms, that certain symptoms may reappear in us. That fear can make the symptom return, something which was not destined to happen, but the repetition comes because we feared that the illness would return. This is an example, and it illustrates anything that we could fear and helps us to reflect a little bit. The fact that it was a crisis does not mean that it should return, but if you begin to fear, you will be attracting, and you will be a candidate to go through that illness again, because fear has the possibility of creating forms. And if you think that you are going to be ill or sick, fear is creating that form. And when that form reaches a certain point, it will be manifested. It concretizes. So preoccupation gives us that. Now, if you become preoccupied or fearful for something or with something, that preoccupation, it will not modify what needs to happen. Because if karmically it needs to happen, it will happen. And it doesn't matter how fearful you may be, it will happen according to the life that you are living. Even a compulsive karma can be diminished if it were important for your life. Through the decisions that you've made, the new decisions, something else can happen. So you see that our life would be much more creative. Our karma would be worked much more intelligently and with more results. If we can part from the point of fear, our first suggestion is that we do not to preoccupy yourselves. When a preoccupation occurs or happens, try to push it away from you. Think about the solutions for them, but keep preoccupation away from you. As you think about the solution, try not to be preoccupied, because the combination of both things, it's truly a childish reaction. The more we concentrate in preoccupations, the more fear that we have. We will give opportunities for negative things to grow within us and outside of us also. On the other hand, the more you put your attention and your interest on positive things, so that the possibilities that exist could be better, healing, the possibilities of healing occur. Now, all fear should be substituted by a total confidence in something that is called divine grace. And this is the spiritual point of this, our lecture, among others that will come. This is fundamental. All fear should be substituted by total confidence in divine grace. And the divine grace is something that we can receive from the universe. Divine grace comes from the universe. It does not come from us. It comes from the universe. Therefore, the universe has the power to resolve whatever, anything, through grace. So it's necessary to take into consideration that grace exists. Grace means to receive something when the universe understands that it should send it. And many times, he sends that grace when it is requested by you. Sometimes the universe sends that grace unexpectedly. And this, we have to have this present. It is fundamental for healing, because sometimes we make ourselves ill and create our illness. Sometimes. It would be very good if we would know some true facts existent on the planet where we live. For example, on this planet, there exist various levels of consciousness. And on the level of astral consciousness, where our emotions develop, where we're very emotional, where we are least mental and more emotive than rational and mental. In that level of the planet, which we call astral consciousness, on that level, there exist various sub-levels. And one of the lowest sub-levels of the astral level is where we find vibrations and situations that are very dense and very negative. That lower astral level, that inferior level of the astral level, that is where there exist created all forms of wars, forms of violent deaths, all forms of human cruelty, all forms of killing of animals. All that is in the lower astral level, and it's all registered there and acting continuously, because it continues here on the surface of the planet in our conscious level. So in that lower astral level, a lot of brutality exists, brutality without limit, and a lot of aggressiveness. There exists there the whole tendency of competition among nations. If the chiefs of the nations could have the consciousness in their higher astral level or the superior mental level, things would not occur as they do among countries. It happens because the leaders, government leaders, live in that lower astral. So with everyone living in that level, that is where the stimulations and reasons are taken from, the motives, the reasons, to do everything that they do. Also aggressiveness among people, among nations, aggressive, and among religions. All that is work from the lower astral level. So this needs to be worked much by all of us, because that is where all the material is found, deteriorated material, and installed there from the beginning of humanity. This is a level that we need to work, this violation, the violation towards of human beings, defenseless human beings, as is happening in the governments. The threats that are made about nuclear wars or biological wars, chemical wars, all those negative factors and all those negative thoughts, all those negative projects generate continuously, generate emanations. All this generates emanation that contaminate the planetary atmosphere. If we could see the planet from a distance, we would see those emanations. We could see that. Nocive, contaminating everything and turning certain areas of the planet almost unbearable to breathe, certain areas of the planet. That is according... We have all this information from the mother, from the ashram of Sri Aurobindo, who warned all her disciples to come out of that astral level, to come out of that emotional level, uncontrolled. And we are all called to do this. We're all called to remove ourselves, to lift ourselves from that astral inferior level through our thoughts, through our actions, And in that level of lower astral also exist elements created artificially, even by the involution energies. And if you don't bring yourself out of there, out of that level, out of that astral emotional level, if you do not come out of there, those beings become like vampires and they suck all your energy. I think we couldn't speak more clearly about the healing of fear in human beings, because fear connects us to all that, to that inferior level. So if you have a specific fear, that will connect you to all other fears. And this begins to generate within you seeds of negative situations. Therefore, we need to become invulnerable to all that. And the only way we can do that is to lift ourselves from that level. And we do this through our thoughts, through our actions, where our cellular memory is very resistant there too. When all that is actioned within us, when it is moving in us, we absorb energies of fear, and the low quality of what we think, the low quality of what we feel, the low quality of what we read, the low quality of what we see on television especially, and the low quality of everything that we listen to, especially on television, very present today in commercial television. Other factors add to that, add to all this that we have, to everything we read, we hear, we see, without selecting. And those other factors are use of drugs, active drugs, use of alcohol. Sometimes a small use of alcohol that some people say that they take it just for fun. That little drop that you take for fun is enough so that everything can return, so that fear, and when everything begins again, it'll be much more difficult to control. That can also happen with the weeds, with some weeds are used thinking that they're inoffensive. All this adds up, and with everything that you read, that you see, that you speak about, and your actions, this begins to create a great margin of risks for your life. And if we add to that the capital energies, luxury, like jealousy, it's very difficult to find people that do not have some qualities of those energies within. The majority of us do, but they need to be worked. And if we add to those energies all this that we've mentioned, all this, including foods, what we drink, begins to take us to the most dense parts of the astral plane. Also, the consummation of meats. That is a direct connection with the lower astral level, because the meat is totally impregnated by the fear of the animal. When it perceives that it will be killed, all its fear is discharged into that meat, which we eat when we eat meat. So there's so many reasons for us to fear. There is so much that could be avoided, and there is so much that could be taken out of our day-to-day, and that would make a great difference in vibration. Because meat, for instance, fear is totally instilled in meat. The animal fear, imagine what we eat, what we ingest. Because we cannot imagine the terror, the fear in an animal when it is killed, when it is assassinated. And that fear is impregnated in its meat. So we are feeding ourselves with fear all the time, and then we do not want to fear of being sick. We do not want to fear a nuclear war. We do not want to fear this or that. And we're eating fear all the time. We need to provide a change in ourselves so those fears can diminish. However, you're probably asking yourself, well, how did fear begin in human beings? How did it emerge? We know that this came from the beginning of humanity, but we were not created with fear because fear did not have this idea for us. We were created, and immediately fear was instilled in us. What was that origin? It's very ancient. It's a very ancient beginning, and it's right after we were created, because we were created with all creation, together with all creation, as it is in the biblical codes. We were created with a lot of things, and at that moment, at the very beginning, the condition of the planet in its beginning were very difficult. The conditions, the atmospheric conditions, the biological conditions, everything on the planet was very difficult at the very beginning. And the transformations that were taking place in the crust of the planet are not foreseen, which complicated the situation atmospheric. There was a part when we were together with giant animals, which is not like today's animal kingdom, which is in another line today and another point. So fear began to impregnate itself from the beginning, due to the ways from the cave times. So we have this as a reality within us. Now, being conscious of all this and becoming conscious of other things that we will see, all this can be changed. And it can be diminished, in some cases, almost disappear. Isn't that fantastic to be able to disappear fear from ourselves? We would have a lot of fear to lose before we could reach that almost total fearlessness. We need, in the beginning, to lift ourselves to the mental plane. Whenever we recognize, whenever we find ourselves in a certain emotional state, we need to bring ourselves out of that. That's the first point. We need to lift ourselves to the mental point, because the emotional point does not connect us to superior levels. The level that begin to connect us with superior levels, with superior life levels, is the high mental level and not the lower physical level. In the high mental level, you will begin to have the elements to begin to connect with a superior life.
A partir da sua estada no alto mental,
it is from the point where you reach, you're able to connect with the higher mental state, where you will begin to connect and to have direct connections with your spirit level. The evolution becomes accelerated, more decisive, which we need to prepare for. We need to look for it so that we can manage to come out of all those things, that we can bring ourselves out of those states which we have been living since the beginning of our
são em maior
creation.
número do que os nossos medos conscientes. De
Our
forma que
unconscious
nós
fears,
temos que
unconscious
nos
fears,
organizar pouco
are greater than our
para,
conscious fears in
eventualmente,
numbers.
irmos tomando
So we need
contato com
to
aqueles medos
work with
que não
ourselves
são conscientes,
and
que
come into
estão no
contact with those
subconsciente, que têm que ser
unconscious
resolvidos
fears
também.
that also need to be resolved.
E temos
And
que
we
contar com
we need
aquele
to count
medo
on that
que fica
fear
até o fim,
that
mas que
remains to
pode
the
ir
last moment,
diminuindo.
but
Que é
that
o que
can
a gente chama
diminish,
de
which is
medo
what we call
celular. Veja,
this the
existe esse
cellular
medo
fear.
da psicologia, existe
There's the
esse medo
psychological
dos
fear.
corpos sutis, mas
There's the fear of the subtle
medo
bodies or
celular,
levels, but it
é
is the
medo que está nas
cellular
nossas
fear,
células.
that fear that is
Este é o
within
que
our
nós teríamos que
cells.
trabalhar mais,
That
e
is
que
what
vai
we
dar mais
need to
trabalho.
work with more,
Agora,
and which will give us the
esse
most
medo
problems.
celular está
Now, that
pouco
cellular
além da nossa
fear
consciência.
is a little
Este medo
bit beyond
celular
our
está
consciousness.
abaixo
This
da
fear
nossa
is
consciência,
below our
começa a
consciousness,
ser percebido no
and
subconsciente.
it is perceived in the
E o que é o medo
subconscious
celular?
level. What is
que é isso?
cellular fear? What
Como
is that?
apareceu isso?
How did that
É
come up?
que as nossas células
Our
físicas,
cells, physical cells,
principalmente,
especially our
as nossas
physical
células
cells,
astrais e as nossas
our
células
astral
mentais,
cells, our mental cells,
elas temem
they fear
a desintegração. Este é um medo
They fear
celular.
disintegration.
Porque
That's a
as
cellular
células
fear, because
físicas,
cells, the physical
emocionais e
cells,
mentais,
emotional and
sabem
mental cells
que
know
dia nós
that someday
desencarnamos.
we will disincarnate.
E esta possibilidade de nós
And that
desencarnarmos,
possibility of
isso as nossas
disincarnating,
células conhecem.
our cells know
E esse é o
this,
nosso medo celular.
and that is our
Então,
cellular fear,
quando você diz que tem medo da
to
morte,
disincarnate.
você
So
tem
when
medo
you
da morte
say
por
you fear
ignorância,
death,
por não
you say you
saber o
fear
que
death
se
for
passa
ignorance
depois
because you
da
do not
morte.
know what
Porque
happens
você
after
sabendo
death.
o que se passa
Because if
depois
you
da
knew
morte,
what
você
would
pode
happen after
saber.
death,
Existem
as you could know,
tratados descrevendo
there
o
are
que se passa
treaties
depois da morte.
describing what
Quando
happens
você se
after death.
instrui sobre
So
isso,
when you
não tem
instruct
mais medo
yourself
da
about
morte.
that, there will be
Agora,
no
se
more
se
fear
mantém
of
na
death.
ignorância,
If you
você não
remain
sabe
in
para onde
ignorance,
vai,
if you do not
não
know where
sabe
you
o
will
que
go,
acontece lá,
and
não
you do not
sabe
know what
como se
happens on the
controlar
other
lá,
side,
e
how
não
to
sabe se
control
preparar
yourself,
para ir,
and how to
evidentemente,
prepare
este é um
yourself
medo
to go
que
there.
passa a ser um medo
That is the
celular.
fear that
Esse é o
becomes
medo
the
sério.
cellular
O
fear,
medo
and
da
that is a
morte
serious
é o
fear.
medo mais sério
Fear
que
of
as nossas
death is
células
the most
têm.
serious fear that
E
our
elas
cells have.
têm a sua razão.
And they
Porque
have
elas
their
sabem
reason
que
because they
com a
know
morte,
that
com a
death,
nossa trajetória
that
nos
through our
outros planos de
trajectory and
consciência, a
other
uma certa
levels of
altura,
consciousness
essas
at a
células,
certain point,
se não
those
conseguem uma
cells,
transubstanciação,
if
essas
those cells are
células
not
têm razão de ter
transubstantiated,
medo, porque estas
they
células
have
devem ter
the
outro
right to feel
destino.
fear because
De
they should
forma
have
que
another
isso é o
destiny.
medo que nós não
So
podemos
that is the
cancelar.
fear
Enquanto
that we
tivermos
cannot
células,
cancel.
isto existe.
As long as
Mas
we have
isso é uma
cells,
coisa
that cellular fear will
perfeitamente
exist.
controlável,
But
e é
it's
uma
totally
coisa que não
controllable,
nos devemos preocupar,
and it is something that we should
sabendo a
not
razão
worry about,
científica disso,
knowing the
e
scientific reason
nos
for it,
mantendo em um nível elevado
and
de
remaining
consciência.
in an
Então, esse medo
elevated
celular
level of
não vai
consciousness.
precisar nos
Then that
atormentar
cellular
a vida inteira,
fear will
se
not
soubermos
torment
nos
us
levar.
through our life if we know how to deal with it.
É
Now,
preciso que a gente saiba como funciona o
it's
pânico.
necessary to know how
Pânico é
panic
algo que
works
pode chegar
because panic is
inesperadamente,
something that
sem
can
que a gente perceba.
arrive unexpectedly.
Quando as vibrações do
When
medo
the vibrations of
não
fear
foram liberadas
have not been liberated
da nossa memória
from
celular,
our
ficou tudo
cellular
ali,
memory and everything remains
algum
there,
estímulo externo, mesmo
any
rápido,
external stimulation, no matter how quick it may be, can activate that
se você
negative
não trabalha a
cellular
transformação
memory.
dos seus pensamentos
So if you do not
negativos,
work
se
the
você não
transformation of your
trabalha
thoughts,
todo o teu
if you
emocional
do not
negativo,
work your
isso vai
negative
acumulando
emotions, your
na
negative
memória
thoughts,
celular.
that is accumulated
certo
in the
momento,
cellular
a
memory,
memória
and
celular
in
é
a
como
certain
se
point,
explodisse com isso.
it's like as if it exploded with that, and that
momento do
becomes the
pânico.
moment
E,
of panic.
em geral,
which in general cannot be controlled,
o pânico
then
não
panic
existe
does not
naqueles
exist
que
in
não deixam
those
que suas
that do
células
not allow their cells.
se ultrapassem certo
They do not
limite,
allow their
não?
cells to
De
go
coisas
beyond a certain
negativas.
level of
Não
negative
existe
things.
pânico nessas pessoas.
Panic will not
não se
exist in
trabalham,
those
não se
beings.
trabalham
Panic
enquanto a coisa
exists in
não está
persons
nesse
and
nível de
beings
gravidade.
who have not
Por
worked
isso, é preciso
with their
muito
fear.
cuidado,
That is
mas
why
muito
it's very
cuidado
important
mesmo,
to be
extremo
very
cuidado
careful, extremely
de
careful
tudo no que nós nos concentramos,
of everything
porque isso vai sendo,
on which we
isso
concentrate
vai
ourselves with,
impregnando, e a
because
uma
that
certa altura, a
impregnates,
seleção
and at a
disso, depois
certain
que entrou,
point,
escapa ao nosso controle.
the selection
Então é
of what we
preciso
have
que isso
chosen to concentrate
seja
on,
muito cuidado e que a gente
it
tenha
needs to be,
muito cuidado
we need to be
com o que
very careful
absorvemos,
with what we
com o que
observe,
lemos,
what we
com o que
read,
falamos, com
what
o que
we
ouvimos,
speak,
com as
what we
conversas,
listen
com certas
to our
situações.
conversations.
Isto tudo
We need to be very careful
chega
with
num
certain
momento
situations,
que
because
na
the
memória
moment might
celular
come in the
pode
cellular
dar
memory
momento de pânico que você fica
where it could go
descontrolado,
into
e aí
panic and
provocando
you will
uma
not be
série
in
de
control,
coisas,
provoking a
inclusive
series of
orgânicas, no seu corpo.
organic situations in your physical body
Mas
through
agora
panic.
já falamos o suficiente
Now
para
we
vermos
spoke
essa questão do
enough
medo
about
mais
this
claramente.
situation of fear to try
Agora
to
vamos
see it a
cuidar da
little bit
parte
more
positiva
clear.
desse
Now
assunto,
let's take care of the
aquela que
positive
nos
part,
abre
that
para
which
uma porta
opens
real, para o
opens
alívio.
up to a true
Nós temos
door,
que
a
nos
real
abrir para
door.
esta porta real,
We need
porque
to
os
open
medos
up
vão
to
se
that
ampliar,
real door
o que
because
vai se
fears will
passar no
be
planeta,
amplified.
tanto geologicamente,
What will be
quanto
happening on the planet,
politicamente,
politically,
como
geologically,
mentalmente,
mentally,
isto vai necessitar que a gente esteja
all
em outro
this
ponto
will need
para
that we
poder
be on another
atravessar
point
esta
so
situação
that we can
de uma
traverse that
forma,
situation
digamos,
in a
tranquila,
tranquil
não é?
way,
Em comparação
in a
com o
calm
que
way,
vai acontecer com a
compared to
maioria.
what will happen with the majority of humanity.
Nós precisamos dar
So then,
início
we
a
need to
processo
begin
de
the
cuidados.
process
Precisamos dar
of
início
taking
a
care of,
processo de
of
irmos nos preservando
of
de
preserving
certas
ourselves from certain things,
coisas, e devemos começar pelas
and we
coisas
must begin
menores,
through the smaller
por essas
things,
coisas que
through those
achamos
little
que não
things that
têm
we think that are
importância,
not important,
porque são essas que
because
vão
those are the
somando
things that
e
will
que a uma
add up
certa altura
and at a certain
dão
moment
sinal
will give us
de
a
que
sign
talvez já seja pouco
that
tarde.
maybe it's a little bit too late.
Vamos nos concentrar agora
Let us
na parte
concentrate now
positiva disso,
on the positive part of
porque
all
se
that.
nós
Because
olharmos realmente para
if
uma
we
outra
truly
coisa,
look at
muda
something else,
completamente a nossa situação interna
our
e
internal
eventualmente
situation
até
changes,
externa, porque
and
o
eventually
positivo
even
atrai o
our
positivo,
external.
e o
Because
negativo
the
atrai
negative
o negativo.
attracts
De
negative,
forma que vamos,
the
então,
positive
ver o lado
attracts
positivo de
positive.
tudo isso.
So now let us look at the positive
E
side
é
of
o que está
everything,
acontecendo
which is what is
atualmente
happening
com as
actually
energias cósmicas.
through the cosmic
Parece
energies.
muito alto, muito elevado? Não, põe
Does it
sua
seem
mente
very
lá. Põe
elevated?
sua mente lá, porque
Put your
lá é que
mind there,
está a
place your
chave.
mind there
Tem
in the
nada de
cosmos.
elevado. Você põe a
That
sua
is
mente
where
lá.
the keys are.
Então,
Put your mind there, your
e
thoughts there.
existe entre as galáxias
Between galaxies, there
processo
exists a whole process
de sutilizar toda a matéria. Então, isso é a primeira
of
coisa com que
subtilizing
temos que estar
all
em
material,
contato.
all matter,
Que
and we
existe
need to be in
projeto
contact with that.
galáctico,
There is a
não
galactic
terrestre,
project, not
galáctico,
terrestrial, galactic,
universal,
universal,
de sutilizar a matéria.
of subtling all
Porque a matéria
matter,
chegou num
making
ponto
it
de densidade
subtler.
e chegou
Because
num ponto de impureza
matter has come
em
to such a
certas
point
áreas do
of
universo da
impurity
galáxia,
and
que
density
a consciência da galáxia
that the
tomou essa
consciousness
decisão
of the galaxy made the
de
decision
começar a
to begin
sutilizar a
to
matéria
subtilize matter,
e sutilizar toda a consciência presente.
and with it
Então
all
veja de que lado você
the
fica.
the present
Se você fica com a
consciousness.
velha
So you need
situação,
to
isto é,
see
se
on
você
what
fica com a
side you will
situação
remain.
do
Will you remain with
presente
the
já que está
present
passando, Ou se você se
situation
volta
that is
para o
passing
futuro,
by,
ou se você se
that
volta
is
para
happening,
isso
or will
que
you
a
turn yourself to
galáxia
the
está
future,
trabalhando.
to that with which the galaxy is working on?
Existe essa tarefa cósmica
So
assumida
that
por
cosmic tasks
energias que
exist
emanam do Sol central. O Sol central
by
não é o
energies
nosso
that come
Sol.
from the
O nosso Sol é o Sol
central
do
sun,
sistema solar.
which is not our
E
sun, it is the
ele
sun of
está aí, nos mantendo vivos, não? Nos mantendo vivos e
that
nos
is the sun
ensinando
that
muitas
keeps us
coisas.
alive and
E teria
teaches us
muito
many
mais coisas
things.
para nos ensinar
And
se
it would
nós
have many more
estivéssemos
things to
atentos a
teach us
ele.
if we were more
Mas,
attentive to it, if we
digamos
paid more
que,
attention.
como ele é
But let us
muito
say
misericordioso,
that since it is
ele não
very
se abala com
merciful,
isso e continua nos dando a vida, apesar
it
de nós
continues to give
todos.
us life
Continua nos dando a vida.
regardless of ourselves.
Mas
It
o que
continues to
vem
give us
não
life.
é deste sol,
But what comes
nos
to us is not
mantém
from this sun that we
eternamente
see.
da mesma forma. O que vem é do
What
Sol
comes
da galáxia,
is from the
que é
sun
Sol
of the galaxy,
muito maior do que
which
esse.
is a much greater
E
sun than
este
this one.
Sol da galáxia
And this
que
sun
vai
of the
assumir
galaxy
a
will assume
purificação
the
e que vai
purification
assumir
of the
a
planet,
sutilização
the
de toda a matéria existente.
and make all matter
Então não é só com a humanidade
subtle.
isto. Isto vai ser
So
com
this is not
toda a
only with
matéria
humanity.
existente.
This will
Nós
happen
precisamos
with
ver
all
grande nessas
existing
coisas
matter.
que
We
a
need to
humanidade vê de
see
forma tão mesquinha. Temos
we
que
need
ver
to see the
isto grande,
greatness. We need to see
grande
this in
para
a great way
podermos,
so
para
that we
podermos
may
perceber, sentir
perceive
uma
and
outra
feel
realidade.
another
Porque há muitos
reality,
níveis de realidade.
because there are many levels of reality.
Uma das repercussões
One of the
dessa
repercussions
irradiação
of that radiation from that
que será mantida pela
sun,
galáxia é que
galactic
a matéria
sun,
dos nossos
is that
corpos
the
passará
matter of our
por uma
bodies
fase
will go through a
como nunca
phase,
passou de
as
sutilização. Nós
a
temos que
phase
estar
of,
ligado com
of
isso e não estar dando corda e alimento para o contrário,
it will
que é a
become
nossa
very
vida
subtle.
normal, a nossa vida comum. Nós temos que
Our
dar
bodies will be
corda
going
para
through
outra coisa.
phases unknown
E
to
temos
us,
que nos
totally
conectar
unknown.
com isto,
And we need to connect
porque
with that,
isto é que vai ser a
because that
fonte
is
da nossa
that will be the
sutilização.
source
Se nós
of
nos
making our
nos
bodies
conectarmos com
subtler.
isto,
If we do not
vamos
connect with
encontrar
that,
no nosso ser,
we will
no
find
nosso ser interior, a força
we will
para
find the
atravessarmos
strength
este
to
momento de
traverse that
desintegração
moment of
de
disintegration
grande parte da humanidade,
of great part of
desintegração
humanity,
dessa
the
civilização e de tudo isso que
disintegration of the
está ocorrendo
civilization
e
and
que estamos
everything that
presenciando.
everything that
Então
is
nós
taking
temos
place and
esta
we are
conexão infinita, porque isto
seeing or
tem
living.
uma força no nosso
This has a
interior.
force within
O nosso
us,
interior
in our
é
inner
aquele
depths.
nível da nossa alma.
It's that level of
Isto é
our
o que nós
soul.
consideramos para esse assunto o nosso interior.
That is what
Não
we
precisa
consider as
ser
our inner
muito mais
world.
fundo do que a alma, não.
It doesn't
Se
need to
você
be
estiver em
deeper
contato
than
com
the
a sua
soul. If you
alma,
connect
você já está
yourselves
em
with your
contato
soul,
com
you will be in
essa
contact
sutilização interior.
with
Vai
that
começar
inner
pela sua alma. Isso
subtleness.
significa
That
que a
means
força de coesão nas células
that the force of
vai se afrouxar.
cohesion
Ou
with the
melhor,
cells,
em alguns casos de pessoas que estão despertas, que não estão
in
adormecidas,
the case of people that are
casos de pessoas que
awakened, that
estão
are not
despertas,
sleeping,
esse
awakened internally,
afrouxamento nas células já
that work
está
on the cells
começando.
is already
E à medida
happening.
que esse afrouxamento vai
And as
começando,
the cells
então tudo
begin,
isso que hoje é encravado, tudo isso que hoje é estratificado, isto tudo vai passando por uma sutilização.
everything goes through, becomes subtler, our cells.
Momento muito singular.
We're living a very
Cujo
singular
medo
moment.
ancestral que as nossas células guardam,
The
esse medo
ancestral
que trouxe da
fear that
pré-história,
our cells
desta
keep
pré-história, isto está sendo
all
aos
this
poucos liberados
is being
pelo
liberated
próprio
little by
afrouxamento
little
dessas células,
by the
dessas
cells
células,
themselves,
com esta força do Sol central
through
que
the
está
strength, the power
promovendo uma
of the
sutilização
central
geral.
sun.
E isto reflete diretamente
And this
na
reflects
nossa alma,
directly on our
reflete
soul,
diretamente no nosso ser interior.
in our inner
Então, o
being.
nosso ser interior
So our
hoje
inner being
está
today
com muito mais condições
has much more
responder
conditions,
a algum
has the
contato
conditions
nosso.
of
O
responding
ser
to some
interior hoje está
contact.
com muito mais condições de
It
responder
is
a uma aspiração
capable
sua,
at this
a
point
responder a
of
uma
responding to an
decisão sua.
aspiration that you may
Claro
have
que a sua
or a
mente tem que
decision
se
that you
organizar
may
aqui fora
have
para não misturar
may
tudo,
have
né?
might have
Nesses
made.
momentos.
And
E
of course your mind has
saber o
to
que é e o que não é.
know what is
Bem
and what is
claramente.
not very
E
clearly, what should be and
quanto
should not be.
menos confusões, quanto
And the least
quanto
confusion,
menos concessões, muito melhor. Bem,
the
isso
least
depende
the
também
less
do sistema
confused
nervoso de cada um, não é? Mas
that we
sistema
are,
nervoso
the better. It
também
depends a lot on
recebe a
our
graça
nervous
divina.
system, and that
Nós
too
teremos que
receives
contar com a
the
graça
divine grace.
divina,
We need
porque
to
isto
count on the
existe.
divine grace because
Então não
that
tem desculpa
exists.
que esse
So
sistema
there's
nervoso é
no
fraco, que isso é fraco,
there's no
que aquilo está
reason
assim.
for saying,
Não
oh, this
tem
is weak,
problema diante
my
da graça divina,
system is
que
weak.
neste momento está se
Before the
apresentando.
divine grace that presents
Bem,
itself to us
para quem
now,
crer,
there is no
a porta
reason
está aberta. Para
for
quem
not
não crer, espere mais um pouco.
doing
Quem
what
sabe
needs
se
to
a
be
porta
done.
se abre. A porta
For
da
those who believe,
imaginação,
the
a
door is
a
open.
porta
For those who do not
porta
believe,
do amor, não?
wait and see what
Porque é a porta
happens.
do amor que tem que
The
se
door
abrir, no
of love
fundo.
needs to open.
Porque
That
isto
is what
do
truly needs to
centro da
open.
galáxia tomar
Because the
essa
center of the
decisão,
galaxy
isso foi a
making
fonte
that
de amor.
decision, that
Isso
was
foi a fonte de
done
amor
by the
real
source of love,
que
the
se
source of
moveu.
real love,
E
which was
você tem
moved.
uma pequena fagulha
And you have
deste amor dentro de você.
and you have a little
Procure,
bit, a
procure
little
acender
drop
esta
of that
fagulha,
love within
ou
you.
procure usar
And that
esta
needs to
fagulha,
be ignited
porque
within
não tem
yourself.
outro caminho
Because
no
there's no
nível
other
humano,
path in the human
a
level
não ser aquele caminho
except that path,
celeste, que
that
são os outros
celestial
planos
path,
inconscientes
which
para
are
nós.
other levels
Aqui
which are
devemos estar
unconscious for
muito
us.
vigilantes,
We need to be
porque
very
os
watchful
adversários,
because
os
the
adversários são as
adversaries,
forças contrárias a isso
those are
tudo. São as forças
the energies that do not want us to go forward.
involutivas, que às
The
vezes
involution
tomam
energies
até
that
áreas de
sometimes even take
personalização. Então, essas forças
materialize
contrárias,
themselves.
esses
Those energies,
adversários da evolução,
those energies,
tentam
adversaries of
muito influir
evolution,
nesse
try
processo.
to influence
Assim
in
que nós
that
temos que estar
process.
muito atentos.
And there we need to be
Muito
very
atentos
attentive,
mesmo.
very
Porque o
attentive,
adversário é
because the
muito
adversary
sutil,
is very
e ele
subtle
entra por uma
and it
fresta que
enters
você nem
through a little
percebeu que
crack
abriu.
that you may not have
Mas quando você
imagined
começa
that you
a
have
sentir a
opened.
presença
And when you
dele,
begin to
que é
feel its
pensamento
presence,
negativo
which may be a
insistente,
negative,
que
an
quer te
insistent,
levar para o contrário
negative
disso tudo,
thought
você
that wants to
identifique
take you
nesse
against
pensamento o
to what you are
adversário,
doing.
porque aí você vai ter
Identify it right
forças
away as the
para
adversary,
lidar com isso.
and then
Nós
you
é
will
que
be able
temos
to
que
deal
lidar
with
com
it.
isso.
We're the ones that need to deal with everything that is negative within us.
O
When we can
a
feel
essa
it, when we
altura é
can
muito
see it,
claro.
we need to deal
Diante
with
de
it.
tudo isso,
Teaching
o ensinamento
among
diz, ore
before
e
all that,
vigie.
the teaching tells us,
Oração
pray
sem
and be
vigilância
vigilant. Prayer
não
without
basta.
vigil is not enough.
Vigilância sem oração
Vigilance
não
without
basta.
prayer is
Não
not enough.
insista, porque
Do
isso é
not
a lei que
insist,
está sendo
insist,
apresentada
because it is the
nesse
law
momento.
that is being
Orai
presented at
e
this
vigiai.
moment, which is
Uma coisa
pray
sem a outra
and be
é
vigilant.
só metade
One
do
thing
trabalho.
without the other would be
Orai
half
e
of the
vigiai.
work. Pray and be
Se
vigilant.
você ora
If you
e
pray
vigia,
and you are watchful,
você deixa que o amor emerja.
you allow love to
Porque
emerge.
com oração
Because
e
through
vigília,
prayer
o
and
amor
vigilance,
emerge.
love
O amor
emerges.
vem de lá de onde ele
Love
está
comes
sepultado.
from where
Ou
it
vem
is
de lá onde
buried
ele está acontecendo
with that
em
which is
planos
happening
tão elevados,
in such elevated
inimagináveis
planes,
para nós.
unimaginable for us.
A única coisa,
The
então,
only
é
thing
nós
then
nos mantermos
is to keep
tranquilos,
ourselves
calmos,
calm,
orando, vigiando
praying,
e em
vigilant,
contato com
and in
aquilo que
contact
está sendo
with that
anunciado.
which is being announced to us.
O início
Planetary.
disso, como
The
já
beginning
sabemos,
of that,
é
as we
nós
know,
nos lembrarmos de certas coisas
is to remember certain things,
que a transformação
that
se dá por amor.
transformation
Sem amor não há
happens
transformação.
through love. Without
Sem
love, there
amor,
is
a
no
troca de uma
transformation.
negatividade por outra. mas não
Without love, you
evolução.
change one
Então é preciso
negative
amor
thing for
para que
another.
isto comece a se operar.
And the presence
Você
of
não
love
sabe
needs to
como
be
começar a amar?
so
Você
that we can
comece
begin to work.
não fazendo mal para os outros reinos.
How do you
Você
begin to love?
comece
Begin by not
colocando os
harming the
outros
other
reinos da
kingdoms.
natureza
Begin by placing the other kingdoms
junto com você.
together with
Reino
yourself.
mineral, reino
The mineral
vegetal,
kingdom,
reino
the
animal,
vegetable kingdom,
principalmente, que nesse
especially the
momento
animal kingdom, which
é
is
o mais
the one that is being most damaged at
mais
this time
prejudicado pela humanidade, não? Então
by
o amor
humanity.
começa
So
com
love
as
begins
nossas ligações com esses
with our
reinos.
connection, through our connection with those kingdoms.
A gratidão pela água que você bebe,
To be
gratidão
grateful
pelo
for the
alimento
water
que
that you
você
drink, to
come,
be grateful
gratidão ao
for the
reino
food you eat,
vegetal, gratidão ao reino
grateful
mineral,
to the vegetable kingdom,
gratidão ao
to
reino
the animal
humano, porque
kingdom, to the human
nós estamos nos
kingdom,
servindo
because we are
mutuamente, não?
serving each
Para
other
você
mutually.
tomar um alimento, é preciso que um ser humano
For you to
tenha
eat,
feito esse
someone
alimento.
else,
Então dê um pouco de
some other
amor para
human
ele,
being
não?
must
Em
make
troca
it.
do alimento. Ou,
So
quando
you
recebe o
have to be
alimento,
grateful
dê esse
for
amor para ele.
everything.
Enfim,
Give that love
nesse
to whoever
amor, é nesse
prepares your
sistema
meals.
de dar amor a
It's a
tudo,
system of loving
porque nós
everything
dependemos de tudo.
because we depend
Então,
on everything and everything
não é
depends
tão
on one
complicado
another.
dar amor a tudo,
It's
não?
not
Porque você sabe
complicated
do que
to
você
give love
depende.
to one
Então,
another
dê
because you
amor a
know
tudo
what you
isso.
depend on. So
Então,
love all that.
existe esta grande entidade que é a mãe do mundo, não? Que diz
So this great entity,
nós
which is
temos
the
que
mother of
entrar
the
na
world,
escola de amar.
tells us that we need
Isto
to
é,
enter
a
the
gente tem que se
school of
lembrar
love.
que quando está
We
comendo
need to
alimento,
remember that
deve agradecer aquilo.
when
Se
we're
você está
nourishing
respirando,
ourselves, we need to
deve
be
agradecer por
grateful.
estar
When we
respirando.
breathe,
Você
we
podia
need
não
to be
poder
grateful for
respirar.
breathing.
Então você
You
deve
could not
agradecer
breathe.
a tudo. Isso
So we need to be
chama-se
grateful for
escola de
everything.
amar.
And that is the
Entrando
school
nessa
of love.
escola de amar,
And entering into that
nós
school of loving,
começamos a sermos capazes de
we
perdoar.
begin to be
Porque assim
capable
como
of
temos
forgiving.
que ser perdoados,
Because just as we
desde o
need to be
princípio,
forgiven from the
temos que
beginning,
ser perdoados,
we need to be
nós
forgiven.
também teremos
We
que
too
perdoar.
need to
Porque nós
forgive.
sempre convivemos com gente semelhante a nós. De
Because we
forma
do
que a
not
esta altura,
always live with people
não
who are
é só pedir
exactly the same as
perdão,
us. So
mas é
this
também estar aberto para perdoar. Porque uma
this
coisa sem a
school is
outra
not only to love, but
também não
also to
funciona.
learn to forgive. Because
Então,
one thing
amor
without the other
sem
does not
perdão,
work.
perdão sem
Love
amor,
without
isto não
forgiveness,
funciona.
forgiveness
Essas coisas
without
vão
love
juntas,
does not
e
work.
assim vamos
Those
aprendendo
things go
a
together.
sintetizar tantas coisas.
And then we begin to learn how
E
to
aí,
synthesize
se
a lot of
conseguirmos
things.
amar
And if we're
os reinos
able
da
to love
natureza,
the kingdoms of nature,
começaremos a ser
we will
capazes de amar a
begin
paz.
to be capable
Nós
of
não
loving
podemos amar
peace.
a paz
But we
enquanto
cannot
não
love
estivermos numa
peace
grande angústia, porque aí não tem
until
outro
we go
remédio,
through
senão
great
amar a
anguish.
paz, que é para a paz começar
If you do not
a
love
aparecer,
peace,
para a paz começar a surgir. Mas se você
it
já
needs
entrou
to
pela
appear.
porta dos reinos
If
da
you have
natureza,
already
já
entered through the
entrou
door
pela
of the
porta
kingdoms of nature,
desse
through the door
agradecimento
of that gratitude
pela vida que você
for
tem,
life,
por
for the
tudo
life
aquilo
that
que
you
você
have, and for
recebe,
everything
se
that you
você
receive,
entrou por essa
if you have
porta,
already
aí você
entered through that
começará a
door,
entrar pela
then
porta
you
da
will
paz.
begin to enter
E
through
aí
the
virá
door
a
of
paz.
peace, and then peace will come.
Na paz, você
And in
começará a
peace,
sentir
you will
compaixão.
begin
Olha,
to
isto
feel
são
compassion.
ritmos
You see,
científicos.
these are
Isto são
scientific
ritmos
rhythms.
científicos
They are
universais. Não quero
universal
inventar outro
scientific
ritmo porque
rhythms.
não
Don't
está na
try
corrente,
to create
não
another
está na
rhythm
corrente evolutiva.
because it would not be in the
Então, aí,
evolution current, in
diante
the
da
current of
compaixão,
evolution.
você
Then, before
começa
compassion,
a começar
you begin
a amar uma coisa
to
que
love
talvez você nunca tenha amado, porque não
something
sabe
that you
como
have
fazer.
never loved
Que é
before
amar a
because maybe
própria
you don't
criação.
know how to do so,
Amar o próprio
which is to
criação,
love
amar
creation
isso que cria,
itself,
não?
to
Ou
love
amar a
this
Deus,
that
como
creates,
muitos falam.
or to love God as many call
Enfim,
it.
se você chega a amar a Deus, você
So
está
if you're
amando a
able of
vida
loving God, you're loving life,
e começando a entrar
and you're beginning to
nesta
enter
situação
into this
bem diferente
situation
da
in a
humanidade
different
comum. Se você
way
começa a
from the
entrar por
common
essa
humanity. If you
porta,
begin
você
to
vai
enter through
conhecer
that door,
algo que a
you will begin
humanidade
to
em
know
geral não
something
conhece,
that
que é o amor
humanity in
superior.
general does
Como
not
é o
know, which
amor?
is a superior love.
faz tudo como é amor,
And
que é
since
tudo,
it is love
você
that
está,
does
então,
everything,
num
it is
bom
love that
caminho.
is everything, then you're on the right path. You're on a good
Eu vou
path.
repetir
I'm
aquelas
going to
coisas bem
repeat
elementares
those very
para que nós
elemental
não
things
percamos o fio.
so that we do not lose the thread.
Nós deveríamos não entrar em contato.
We need not to
Deveríamos
enter into
evitar ao
contact.
máximo.
We need to avoid
Deveríamos
to
nos
a maximum.
abstrair
We need
de
to abstract
coisas
ourselves
violentas,
from violent
de
things,
guerras, de
from
mortes
wars,
violentas,
from
de
violent deaths,
crueldades humanas.
from human
Você
cruelties.
estando orando,
If you
orando
pray, as you pray
e meditando,
and
você
meditate,
está ajudando tudo
you
isso.
are
Você não precisa
helping
pensar
all
nisso.
that. You do not
Você não
need to
precisa
think about it.
investigar isso.
You do not need to
Você
investigate it.
ore
If you
e-
just pray,
e coloque
you
isso
pray
tudo em linha
and you will help
e
that.
você vai colaborando
You
sem
will
nem
be able to
perceber.
collaborate
Com a
without
matança dos
perceiving.
animais, é
With the
óbvio
killing of
que você não
animals, it's obvious
vai reconhecer o que significa a matança
that
dos animais
you
e
cannot
publicar, né?
understand,
Você
you
tem
cannot
aí que fazer uma
recognize
mudança
what
em
it
você,
means
se
if you
quiser,
eat meat.
não é? Se
But you can
quiser
begin to make a
entrar
change within yourself
num
if you
outro
want
estado
to
de
enter
espírito, se quiser
into another
dia
state of
chegar
spirit.
a
If
viver
one
o
day
amor
you want
superior.
to be able to
E as
reach
competições
and live
entre as
superior
nações,
love,
que são coisas
the
de
competitions
seres
among nations
deportados de
is
outras
something
áreas
from
do
deported
universo.
beings from other
E
parts of the
povos,
universe
religiões, brigas
and
entre religiões.
religions
Vocês não
fighting amongst
participem
another.
disso,
Do
mas
not
nem em
participate of
sonhos.
those, not even
Se
in
sonharem
dreams.
com briga entre
If you
religiões, entre
dream
nações,
with
se sonharem
fights
com
among
isso, peçam a
nations,
Deus que
among
te
religions,
acorde. Nem em
ask God
sonhos
to
deve entrar em
wake you
contato com isso. Não
so
deve
that you do
tomar
not enter into
conhecimento
contact,
disso.
not
Cuide
even through your
daquilo que é
dreams.
positivo,
You
cuide
must
daquilo que
take
o
care of what is
sol das
positive.
galáxias está
You
cuidando.
must take care of
Porque
what
aí
the
você
sons of the
encontra,
galaxy
você vai
is taking
encontrar
care of.
outro
And there
sentido
you
de
will find
irmandade,
another
mas uma irmandade
feeling of
muito maior
brotherhood, a
do que essa que
greater
você
brotherhood
conhece.
than that which you know. Well,
Vamos procurar também, não?
let us
Cuidar
also
da qualidade do que pensamos,
take care
é
of
básico,
the quality of
da
our
qualidade
thoughts,
do que sentimos,
the quality of what we
da
feel,
qualidade do que lemos,
the quality of what we
da
read,
qualidade do que assistimos,
the quality of what we assist, what we see, what we look at, where we go. Let us take care of all those things so that we do not find
dentro do nosso ser, no
serious
nosso interior,
obstacles
para
within
que
us,
possamos
and so that we can
nos conduzir neste momento de
lead
forma
ourselves at
a
this
não
moment
participarmos desta
in non-participation
desintegração
of
que
this
está a caminho.
integration which
Muito
is
obrigado então
on the
pela
path.
atenção.
Thank you so
Muito
much for your
obrigado.
attention. Thank you very much.